For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the evening of March 15, 1996, 33-year-old Grant Harper entered the Great Pyramid of Giza with his camera equipment and a special permit to film after hours. He never emerged. Despite an extensive search operation that combed through every accessible chamber of the ancient monument, Grant seemed to have been swallowed by the very mystery he sought to document. Security guards found his abandoned equipment in the king's chamber, but the filmmaker had vanished without a trace. For 22 years, his family and colleagues could only speculate about what happened inside one of humanity's most enigmatic structures. Then, in 2018, during routine restoration work, workers made a discovery in a sealed chamber that would unravel not just Grant's disappearance, but a decades-long criminal enterprise that reached into the highest levels of Egypt's archaeological community. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Grant Harper. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. The sun was setting over the Giza Plateau on October 15, 1996, casting long shadows across the ancient limestone blocks of the Great Pyramid. Grant Harper stood at its base, his camera equipment packed carefully for what would be his final shoot. The 33-year-old documentary filmmaker from Los Angeles had spent weeks documenting the mysteries of ancient Egypt, but this evening's private access to the king's chamber promised to be the cornerstone of his independent film. The air grew cooler as darkness descended over the archaeological site. Grant had secured special permission for after-hours filming through his local contacts, a privilege rarely granted to foreign documentarians. His longtime collaborator, Dr. James Sullivan, had chosen to remain at their hotel, fighting off a bout of food poisoning that had struck earlier that day. "I'll see you in a few hours," were Grant's last words to Sullivan, spoken through a crackling phone line. "This footage is going to be incredible." Security logs show Grant entered the pyramid at 6:45 p.m., accompanied by 2 site guards who would remain stationed at the entrance. He carried 3 cases of equipment: his primary camera, lighting gear, and sound recording equipment. The guards reported that Grant appeared excited but professional, methodically checking his gear as he prepared to ascend through the grand gallery toward the king's chamber. The ancient passageways of the Great Pyramid were illuminated only by permanent lighting fixtures and Grant's portable equipment. The humidity inside was thick, and the limestone walls seemed to absorb both sound and light. For nearly 2 hours, the guards heard only occasional echoes of movement from deep within the structure. At 8:52 p.m., one of the guards reported hearing what sounded like a muffled shout, followed by silence. Thinking nothing of it at first, sounds often played tricks in the pyramid's acoustic chambers. They waited another 30 minutes before conducting a routine check. What they found in the king's chamber would launch a 2-decade mystery. Grant's expensive camera equipment lay carefully arranged on the chamber floor, positioned for what appeared to be a planned shot. His notebook sat open nearby. The last entry, a hastily scrawled observation about unusual shadows in the northwestern corner. A half-drunk bottle of water and a protein bar wrapper suggested he had settled in for a long filming session. But Grant Harper himself had vanished. The guards immediately initiated search protocols, calling in additional security personnel who combed every accessible chamber and corridor of the pyramid. By midnight, the Egyptian tourist police had arrived, and by dawn, the case had landed on the desk of the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. Dr. Sullivan, still weakened from his illness, arrived at the site as soon as he received the call. Everything was exactly as Grant would have set it up, he later recalled in police interviews. He was meticulous about his equipment. There's no way he would have just walked away from it. The following days saw an extensive search operation that expanded to include the entire Giza Plateau. International media descended upon the site, broadcasting images of search teams examining every crevice of the ancient structure. Grant's family flew in from California, making despair. 8 appeals for information about their son's whereabouts. Yet despite the intensity of the search, no signs of struggle were found, no blood evidence was detected, and no witnesses came forward with useful information. The pyramid's security cameras showed Grant entering, but none captured his exit. It was as if the ancient structure had simply swallowed him whole, adding one more mystery to its millennia-old collection of secrets. Site supervisor Rashid Hassan, who had approved Grant's after-hours access, expressed shock at the disappearance. Mr. Harper was experienced, respectful of the site's protocols, and well-prepared, he told investigators. This is unprecedented in my 15 years overseeing the pyramid complex. As the first week drew to a close, investigators had only theories and questions. Had Grant discovered something he wasn't meant to see? Had he fallen victim to an accident in an unexplored chamber? Or had something more sinister occurred in the shadows of one of humanity's most enduring monuments? The answers would remain hidden within the pyramid's walls for 22 years, as would the dark truth about the real events of that October night. As dawn broke over Cairo on October 17, 1996, a team of specialized investigators from the Egyptian tourist police gathered at the base of the Great Pyramid. The first 48 hours of any missing persons case are crucial, and the disappearance of Grant Harper had already garnered international attention. Inspector Ahmed Khalil, a veteran of the tourist police with 20 years of experience, took command of the investigation. His first order was to establish a comprehensive grid search of the pyramid's interior, marking and documenting every accessible chamber, corridor, and crevice. Teams of archaeologists familiar with the structure's layout joined the effort, bringing their intimate knowledge of the ancient monument's hidden recesses. The American embassy dispatched consular officers to assist, working alongside Egyptian authorities while maintaining constant contact with Grant's increasingly desperate family. Dr. James Sullivan, still recovering from his illness, provided investigators with detailed information about Grant's work habits and recent behavior. Grant was methodical, almost obsessive about his documentation, Sullivan explained during his formal interview. He had been particularly excited about some architectural anomalies he'd noticed in the lower chambers, but he never mentioned feeling threatened or concerned about anything unusual. The investigation team focused intensely on the recovered equipment from the king's chamber. Grant's camera contained 43 minutes of footage from that evening, showing nothing more than standard documentary shots of the pyramid's interior. The final frame captured a partial view of the northwestern corner of the king's chamber, exactly where his notebook had indicated those unusual shadows. Security footage from the pyramid complex proved frustratingly incomplete. While cameras clearly showed Grant entering the structure at 6:45 p.m., the exterior cameras covering potential exit points had experienced a 17-minute power fluctuation later that evening. This crucial gap in surveillance would later prove significant, though investigators didn't realize it at the time. Site supervisor Rashid Hassan provided detailed access logs and maintenance records to the investigators. He explained the complex's security protocols and suggested searching several rarely visited chambers that tourists never saw. Hassan's cooperation appeared thorough and professional, raising no immediate suspicions among the investigative team. As the second week began, 3 primary theories emerged. The first suggested an accident, that Grant had somehow accessed an unstable area of the pyramid and become trapped or injured. The second proposed voluntary disappearance, though this seemed unlikely given his abandoned equipment and upcoming project commitments. The third and most troubling theory suggested foul play, but physical evidence remained elusive. Dr. Sullivan, working with the American embassy, coordinated with international media outlets to maintain public interest in the case. CNN and BBC ran regular updates, while Egyptian newspapers published detailed maps of the search areas. Yet despite the global attention, solid leads remained scarce. The investigation faced unique challenges within the Pyramid complex. The ancient structure's massive stone blocks and complex acoustic properties made traditional search methods difficult. Ground-penetrating radar proved unreliable due to the density of the limestone. Even the most experienced archaeological experts admitted that the pyramid likely contained chambers and passages still unknown to modern scholars. By the end of the second week, investigators had interviewed 73 people, including all pyramid complex employees, regular tour guides, and visiting archaeologists who had been on site that week. They had photographed and cataloged every item Grant had left behind, analyzed his recent communications, and explored every documented chamber within the pyramid. Yet they were no closer to understanding what had happened to the American filmmaker. Inspector Khalil found himself facing increasing pressure from both Egyptian authorities and international observers. The case threatened to impact tourism at Egypt's most famous monument, and political pressure mounted for a swift resolution. But as October drew to a close, the investigation began to stall. The mystery of Grant Harper's disappearance would slowly fade from headlines, becoming another unsolved case in the pyramid's long history, until a shocking discovery 22 years later would reveal the dark truth that had been hidden within those ancient walls all along. As weeks turned into months, the investigation into Grant Harper's disappearance gradually lost momentum. The initial fervor of international media coverage diminished, replaced by occasional retrospective pieces marking somber anniversaries. The bustling command center at the base of the Great Pyramid was dismantled, and the teams of searchers dwindled until only the most dedicated remained. Grant's parents, Michael and Patricia Harper, made monthly trips from Los Angeles to Cairo throughout the first year, their hope dimming with each fruitless visit. They established a reward fund for information, plastered the streets of Cairo with multilingual posters, and hired private investigators who proved no more successful than their official counterparts. Dr. James Sullivan refused to return to Los Angeles, instead taking up temporary residence in Cairo. He spent countless hours reviewing Grant's notes and footage, searching for any overlooked clues. Grant was more than my colleague, Sullivan would later recall. He was like a brother. Every time I walked through those pyramid chambers, I felt like I was missing something obvious, something right in front of me. The case file grew thick with false leads and dead ends. A tourist from Germany claimed to have seen Grant in Alexandria, but security footage proved otherwise. A psychic from England insisted his spirit was trapped in a previously undiscovered chamber, leading to yet another fruitless search. Each disappointing lead seemed to push the truth further into shadow. Site supervisor Rashid Hassan continued his regular duties at the pyramid complex, occasionally assisting with follow-up investigations. He maintained a professional demeanor throughout, expressing appropriate concern while efficiently managing the site's daily operations. His detailed knowledge of the pyramid's layout and security protocols made him an invaluable resource, though his suggestions never led to breakthrough discoveries. By 1998, the case had been officially classified as cold. The dedicated phone line in the tourist police office rang less frequently. The thick file of witness statements and search reports was transferred to a storage facility outside Cairo, gathering dust alongside other unsolved mysteries. International media outlets stopped calling for updates, and even the most dedicated independent investigators moved on to other cases. The Harper family marked each passing year with a small ceremony at their Los Angeles home, keeping Grant's memory alive while gradually accepting they might never know his fate. They maintained a website dedicated to the case, though visits to the site dwindled with each passing year. Patricia Harper continued to send letters to Egyptian authorities every few months, her requests for information meeting with increasingly brief responses. Dr. Sullivan eventually returned to documentary filming, though he never again worked in Egypt. He dedicated his next project to Grant's memory, creating a powerful piece about unsolved disappearances at archaeological sites. Worldwide, the film earned critical acclaim, but Sullivan found no satisfaction in its success. "Every frame," he said, "reminded me of the story I couldn't finish, the friend I couldn't find." The pyramid complex itself seemed to absorb the mystery, adding Grant's disappearance to its millennia of secrets. Tourists continued their daily visits, guides occasionally mentioning the American filmmaker who vanished within its walls. The story became another thread in the tapestry of legends surrounding the ancient structure, a modern mystery among ancient ones. By 2010, even the most optimistic observers had abandoned hope of resolution. Rashid Hassan retired from his position as site supervisor, receiving commendations for his long service to Egyptian archaeology. The case file gathered more dust, the evidence boxes remained sealed, and Grant Harper's camera equipment sat in a police storage facility, its final footage seemingly holding no answers. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly cold case, unseen currents were moving. The truth about Grant's fate lay hidden in the pyramid's shadows, in sealed chambers and secret records, in the conscience of those who knew more than they had revealed. It would take another 8 years, a major restoration project, and a series of unexpected discoveries to finally bring the dark truth to light, revealing a story more disturbing than anyone had imagined during those long years of uncertainty. The summer heat bore down mercilessly on the Giza Plateau in June 2018, as restoration specialists began their careful work inside the Great Pyramid. What started as a routine structural assessment of the ancient monument's lesser-known chambers would soon unravel a 22-year-old mystery. Lead conservator Ahmed Mahmoud noticed it first, an anomaly in the masonry of a narrow maintenance shaft. Modern debris had accumulated in a way that suggested recent human activity, despite the area being officially sealed for decades. As his team carefully cleared the passage, they discovered a hidden chamber that didn't appear on any official site maps. The air was stale, thick with decades of undisturbed dust. Their flashlights revealed scattered pieces of modern debris, a water bottle from the 1990s, a deteriorated leather camera strap, and finally, the grim discovery that would shock the archaeological community: human remains, partially mummified by the pyramid's dry, stable environment. Inspector Amira Farouk from the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities arrived within hours of the discovery. As she surveyed the scene, her experienced eye caught details that immediately raised alarms. Scattered near the remains were small artifacts that clearly didn't belong in this section of the pyramid: pieces of jewelry and fragments of small statuary that should have been secured in the site's archaeological storage facilities. The forensics team worked methodically in the confined space, documenting every detail. Personal effects found with the remains included a corroded watch, a badly degraded wallet, and most significantly, a professional camera memory card protected inside a sealed case. Though the remains had been undisturbed for decades, the identity of the deceased became clear as soon as the wallet's contents were carefully examined. Grant Harper had finally been found. But the discovery raised more questions than it answered. The chamber showed signs of regular access despite being officially sealed. Tool marks on the walls were far too recent, and small items suggested frequent human presence. Most troubling were the documented artifacts scattered throughout the space, items that had been reported missing from the pyramid complex's collection over the years. As Inspector Farouk expanded her investigation, she discovered that the chamber had been part of a sophisticated operation hidden within the pyramid's vast network of passages. Records showed that Rashid Hassan, the former site supervisor, had authorized numerous structural surveys of this area during his tenure, always working with a small, select team of employees who had since disappeared from the archaeological community. The memory card, though damaged, yielded fragments of footage when analyzed by digital forensics experts. The recovered images showed more than just documentary footage. They revealed glimpses of systematic theft, carefully organized removal of artifacts, and most damning, clear shots of Hassan himself, directing the illegal operations. Dr. James Sullivan, now retired from filmmaking, flew to Cairo immediately upon hearing the news. Standing in the chamber where his friend's remains were discovered, he finally understood the true significance of Grant's last message about unusual shadows in the northwestern corner. He wasn't just filming architecture that night, Sullivan realized. He had stumbled onto something much darker. The investigation team soon discovered that the chamber had served as a temporary storage space for stolen artifacts before they were smuggled out of the pyramid complex. The position of Grant's remains and the scattered equipment told a clear story. He had discovered the operation during his after-hours filming and paid the ultimate price for his discovery. As news of the find spread through the archaeological community, the full scope of the tragedy began to emerge. Grant Harper hadn't simply vanished. He had unwittingly documented a sophisticated antiquities theft operation and lost his life protecting the very history he had come to record. His final footage, though fragmentary, would prove crucial in understanding a criminal enterprise that had operated undetected for years within one of the world's most famous monuments. The pyramid had finally yielded its dark secret, but the revelation would lead investigators down an even darker path, exposing a network of corruption that reached far beyond the confines of the ancient structure. Grant Harper's story, frozen in time for 22 years, was about to shake the foundations of Egypt's archaeological establishment. The discovery of Grant Harper's remains sparked a new phase of investigation that would uncover one of the largest antiquities theft operations in Egyptian history. Specialist Omar Abdulrahman, renowned for solving complex archaeological crimes, took charge of the case in July 2018, bringing fresh eyes to evidence both old and new. In his quiet, methodical way, Abdulrahman began by reconstructing the original investigation's timeline. He pored over yellowed police reports and faded photographs, noting how Rashid Hassan's helpful suggestions had consistently directed searches away from the hidden chamber where Grant's remains were ultimately found. The specialist's examination of the pyramid's maintenance records revealed a pattern. Hassan had documented regular inspections of supposedly sealed chambers, always accompanied by the same small group of workers. These inspections coincided with the disappearance of numerous artifacts from the site's inventory, each piece carefully written off as transferred or in restoration. Former pyramid complex employees, now free from Hassan's influence, began to speak. A night guard recalled unusual activities during the graveyard shift vehicles arriving well after tourist hours, loaded crates being moved through service entrances. A junior archaeologist remembered being sharply warned away from certain areas during Hassan's inspections. Abdulrahman's team meticulously mapped every chamber and corridor mentioned in Hassan's records, creating a digital model of the theft operation's logistics. The hidden chamber where Grant was found sat at the heart of a web of unauthorized access points, each carefully concealed from official site maps. The recovered fragments of Grant's final footage proved invaluable. Though badly degraded, the images showed Hassan directing workers as they carefully removed small artifacts from their original locations. In one crucial frame, Grant's camera had captured Hassan examining a solid gold scarab beetle, an item that had been reported missing in 1997 and later surfaced in a private collection in Dubai. Dr. Sullivan, working alongside Abdulrahman, provided crucial context about Grant's filming methods. He always shot wide, establishing shots before moving in for details, Sullivan explained. If he discovered something suspicious, he would have documented everything. This insight led investigators to search for additional memory cards, revealing more documentation of the theft operation. The investigation uncovered a sophisticated network that extended far beyond the pyramid complex. Hassan had maintained connections with black market antiquities dealers across the Middle East and Europe. Financial records showed payments routed through multiple shell companies, while shipping manifests revealed how artifacts had been smuggled out disguised. As construction materials. As summer turned to autumn, Abdulrahman's team pieced together the events of Grant's final night. The filmmaker had likely noticed unusual activity while setting up his equipment in the king's chamber. Following the sound of voices, he had documented the theft operation in progress. Hassan, discovering Grant's presence, had confronted him in the hidden chamber. The evidence painted a clear picture of Hassan's criminal enterprise, an operation that had systematically looted Egypt's heritage for nearly 2 decades. Grant Harper, armed only with his camera, had stumbled upon the truth and paid with his life. His final act of documentation would prove to be his most important, exposing a network that had stolen artifacts worth millions and betrayed the very history it was meant to protect. The new investigation would continue for months, following leads across continents, recovering stolen artifacts, and unraveling a conspiracy that had operated in the shadows of one of humanity's greatest monuments. But at its heart was the simple, tragic story of a filmmaker who had sought to capture history and instead became part of it. The breakthrough in the Grant Harper case came not from the physical evidence, but from a letter discovered in a safety deposit box in Cairo's central bank. Rashid Hassan, before his death in 2012, had left behind a detailed confession, its pages yellowed but its words sharp with the weight of long-carried guilt. Hassan's letter revealed the full scope of that October night in 1996. He described how Grant Harper had accidentally filmed a midnight operation to remove artifacts from a restricted chamber. The American filmmaker had hidden behind an ancient column, his camera capturing every detail of the theft. When Hassan spotted the reflection from Grant's lens, he knew their entire operation was compromised. The confession painted a chilling picture of the confrontation that followed. Grant had tried to reason with Hassan, suggesting they could work together to document the site's security vulnerabilities. But Hassan, who had spent years building his smuggling network, saw only threat in the filmmaker's earnest proposals. The struggle was brief, ending in the hidden chamber that would become Grant's tomb for 22 years. Digital forensics experts worked painstakingly to recover data from Grant's damaged memory cards. The restored footage proved devastating, clear images of Hassan and his team carefully removing priceless artifacts from their ancient resting places. The videos showed an organized operation, workers using specialized tools, items being carefully wrapped, and Hassan himself directing the entire process with practiced efficiency. The scope of Hassan's criminal enterprise emerged with each new piece of evidence. Inventory records matched against his private documents revealed the theft of over 300 significant artifacts during his tenure. The items ranged from small amulets to priceless statuary, each piece carefully selected for its value on the black market. Conservative estimates placed the total value of stolen artifacts at over $40 million. Grant's recovered footage also revealed the sophisticated nature of the theft ring. Hassan had developed a network of corrupt officials who helped falsify documentation, customs agents who facilitated illegal exports, and international dealers who laundered the artifacts through legitimate-seeming sales. The operation had tentacles reaching from Cairo to Geneva, Dubai to New York. Inspector Farouk's team traced dozens of stolen pieces to private collections worldwide. A gold funerary mask turned up in a Swiss vault. A set of carved canopic jars was discovered in a Manhattan penthouse. Each recovery brought new revelations about the network's reach and sophistication. The most damning evidence came from Hassan's own meticulous records. He had documented every theft, every sale, every payoff. His notes revealed how he had manipulated the initial investigation of Grant's disappearance, using his position to misdirect searches and destroy evidence. The very thoroughness that had protected his criminal enterprise for decades now served to expose its every detail. For Grant's family, the revelations brought a complex mixture of closure and renewed pain. The truth of their son's fate emerged from Hassan's confession with brutal clarity, but it also illuminated the courage of his final moments. Grant had died attempting to expose a crime against history itself, his camera serving as both witness and weapon. The investigation's findings shook Egypt's archaeological community to its core. Hassan's network had operated within the pyramid complex for almost 2 decades, its members hidden behind credentials and authority. The theft ring had taken advantage of the very systems designed to protect Egypt's ancient treasures, turning security protocols into tools of deception. As the full scope of the operation became clear, the impact rippled through the international antiquities market. Collectors and institutions rushed to verify the provenance of their Egyptian artifacts. Museums launched internal investigations, and auction houses pulled suspicious items from upcoming sales. The exposure of Hassan's network forced a global reckoning with the dark realities of archaeological theft. Grant's recovered footage, though incomplete, would become crucial evidence in prosecuting surviving members of the theft ring. His final documentation, captured at the cost of his life, provided irrefutable proof of crimes that might otherwise have remained forever hidden in the pyramid's shadows. In death, he had accomplished what he had dedicated his life to, revealing truth through the lens of his camera. In the aftermath of the Grant Harper investigation, the impact rippled through Egypt's archaeological community like aftershocks from an earthquake. By early 2019, prosecutors had built cases against 23 surviving members of Hassan's network, including former customs officials, antiquities dealers, and museum curators who had facilitated the decades-long theft operation. The recovery effort became one of the largest in Egyptian history. Teams of specialists tracked stolen artifacts across 4 continents, working with Interpol and local authorities to reclaim pieces of Egypt's heritage. A carved limestone relief surfaced in a Tokyo auction house. A collection of gold amulets was discovered in a London bank vault. Each recovery brought new leads, expanding the web of complicity that had protected the theft ring for so long. Changes swept through the Giza pyramid complex with unprecedented speed. Security protocols were completely overhauled, with new technology installed to monitor every corner of the ancient structure. Previously unmapped chambers were documented and sealed, while access to restricted areas now required multiple levels of authentication. The hidden passages that had served Hassan's operation were permanently closed, though not before being thoroughly documented by archaeological teams. Dr. James Sullivan returned to Egypt one final time, carrying the weight of both closure and responsibility. Working with the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, he completed the documentary Grant had begun 22 years earlier. The film, titled The Pyramid's Shadow, combined Grant's recovered footage with new material documenting the theft ring's exposure. It premiered at the Cairo Film Festival to international acclaim, serving as both memorial and warning. Grant's parents established a foundation in their son's name, dedicated to protecting archaeological sites worldwide. The Grant Harper Initiative provided funding for security technology and training programs, ensuring that future generations of site supervisors would serve as guardians rather than thieves of history. Inspector Farouk's final report detailed the full scope of Hassan's operation: 342 artifacts stolen, valued at over $47 million. More than 60% of the pieces were eventually recovered, each one representing a small victory in the larger battle against antiquities theft. The remaining items were listed in an international database. Their photographs circulated to museums and collectors worldwide. The pyramid complex itself seemed to exhale as its secrets were finally revealed. Tourist guides now included Grant's story in their presentations, pointing out the king's chamber where he had made his fatal discovery. His sacrifice became part of the pyramid's long history, a modern legend intertwined with ancient ones. In October 2019, on the 23rd anniversary of Grant's disappearance, a small bronze plaque was installed near the pyramid's entrance. Its simple inscription read, "In memory of Grant Harper, who gave his life protecting humanity's shared heritage. His truth, like these stones, endures." Dr. Sullivan attended the ceremony, standing quietly as the evening shadows stretched across the plateau, just as they had on that fateful night in 1996. The case's resolution brought sweeping changes to archaeological site security worldwide. Institutions reviewed their protection protocols, implementing lessons learned from the Hassan investigation. The international antiquities market faced stricter regulations, with new requirements for proving artifact provenance and ownership history. Grant's recovered footage became required viewing at archaeological training programs, a stark reminder of the ongoing threat to historical sites. His final documentation served as both evidence and education, teaching future generations about the price of protecting our shared past. The pyramid still stands, ancient and eternal, but its shadows now hold fewer secrets. Grant Harper's story became more than a tragedy. It became a catalyst for change, a reminder that the truth, though sometimes buried deep, eventually finds its way into the light. His legacy lives on in every secured chamber, every protected artifact, and every piece of history preserved for future generations to study and cherish.